Now, victims of crime and former offenders will sit under one roof in Pretoria today and come up with better ways of living together harmoniously. The two-day event hosted by the Department of Correctional Services will focus on rehabilitation and successful reintegration into communities. To discuss this further, we're now joined by spokesperson of the department, Mr. Manelisi Wolela. Very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you.
Talk to us about the origins of this initiative and its objectives.
You know, primarily the mandate of the Department of Correctional Services is a three-legged one. One, it's safe and humane custody. The second one is effective rehabilitation of offenders. And the third one is successful social reintegration of offenders. And the Deputy Minister, since he started in Correctional Services last year, he has gone right around the country and has interfaced with various people, ex-offenders, and has looked at our facilities and has realized that there's a serious, significant gap which must be closed. One, which relates to how we deal with rehabilitated offenders when they go back to society. Do they get accepted by society? And what is the contribution of that acceptance or non-acceptance to the continuation of reoffending in our country, which places our people in a precarious position because it compromises safety. So he decided that he is going to convene this conference of ex-offenders, bring on board NGOs that are working with offenders as well as victims, so that together we can find a way of saying, how do we deal with both criminogenic factors, which to a large extent are individually focused, as well as socio-economic structural factors relating to issues of the criminal records, employability, the business, chances of succeeding in business, and you name them.
I'm glad you touched on that, because reoffending largely depends on whether or not the person has been reintegrated into society, but also whether or not they're employable thereafter. If they can't find jobs, chances are they're going to go back into a life of criminality. What sort of programs are in place to sort of shepherd them and guide them to make sure that they're reintegrated and that they do find some sort of income-generating streams?
Currently, we've had a significant shift in terms of paradigm shift in correctional services from pure incarceration and security focus to emphasizing rehabilitation and social reintegration. Part of rehabilitation has been the introduction of full-time schools. From 2009 to now, we've moved from just one school to 14 full-time schools in correctional services. The same applies. Within the same period, we have trained over 10,000 offenders in terms of technical skills. Because remember, the industry requires more people with those skills than pure academic streams. So we are putting greater emphasis, working, of course, together with CETAs, the Department of Labor, etc. But what is critical is that now we're increasing that volume of people coming from our facilities with skills in business, in entrepreneurship, and you name them. But the question is acceptance by society, that people need to remember this thing. That's what the dear Deputy Minister Thabang Mogatla is emphasizing, that we are given 20 billion rands to implement this program of government. And we cannot, of course, people are funding us. We cannot afford to then ignore the product and the work that has been done using that 20 billion. Otherwise, it's going to be fruitless expenditure. It's very important, therefore, to mobilize every sector of society, bring them on board to understand what is going on and be part and parcel of creating what we want to see in South Africa, second chances for offenders.
And of course, we shouldn't forget that, offenders are manifestations of the society in which we live. They are a product of who we are as a people at the moment. So we can't, as my cameraman was saying jokingly, can't lock them up and throw away the key. It's unconstitutional as well, and they also have rights. But we'll speak about that in just a moment. I want to focus on victim-offender dialogues and reconciliation there. It is an admirable quest. Some might say, though, it runs the risk of being a PR exercise that's quite superficial for the cameras. Look, here's a victim, here's an offender, they're shaking hands and all of that, and they walk away together in the sunset. How do we make sure that it's genuine, and how do we make sure that we do give ongoing support? Because you can say, I forgive with my mouth, or I will no longer reoffend, but the psychological processes that are involved, etc., how do you then make sure that this is sustainable ongoing?
Wonderful. That's a crucial point. Remember, the process that we're involved in victim-offender dialogue is not only purely focusing on the offenders, it's also focusing on the victims to be able to help them outgrow that victimhood mentality and to be able to be free of this thing. Remember, the role of forgiveness you are the biggest beneficiary of forgiveness rather than the person who benefits someone who has perpetrated this. So we're promoting those critical values which I think our founding father of democracy championed throughout his life. So we are following those principles that we're trying to push. What is critical, though, is that nobody is forced to get through the victim-offender dialogue. It's more of a voluntary participation. But of course, what is crucial is that it gets considered when we have to consider placement of offenders on parole going forward. So there are some incentives. But over and above that, what happens is that we're utilizing offender labor to also intervene in terms of creating a better life for victims in the outer society. There, for example, the Deputy Minister handed over a house to a mother whose breadwinner was killed by offenders who were brutalized in that family. So offenders were also used sort of a reparation of the harm that was caused by crime. So those are the things that cannot succeed unless the rest of society joins hands.
Indeed, that conference taking place today and tomorrow, the two-day event in Pretoria. Thank you so much for bringing us up to speed with that. Department of Correctional Services spokesperson, Mr. Manelisi Wolela.